Hey guys, welcome back. We are going to go over some highlights of chapter on personality, chapter 11. So thanks for coming back, listening to me. Again, if there's background noises, I apologize ahead of time. All right, so the thing I want to just talk about in personality chapter is, first of all, define it. It refers to individuals' unique, consistent way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So this is chapter 11, and I'm going through the PowerPoint slides. I kind of recommend you do the same so that we're just not staring at each other. But listen to my voice as we go through some of these slides. So my chapter 11 slides start out with just what is personality. You know, everybody has personality. Everybody has a consistent way that they deal with the world. You can have good days and bad. You can have situations that bring out the worst and the best in you. But for the most part, your personality is consistent. It's your consistent way of how you see the world, how you make decisions, your mannerisms, your thinking, the way you feel, and the way you act. So personality theories in psychology seek to help individuals figure out how we became that, what made us who we were, what affected our personality. Of course, genetics. Put that on the table. Genetics are a big part of our personality, even when we don't know or around the people that biologically made us. We can have a lot of similarities to them. Mannerisms, certain personality like traits, introversion, extroversion, sometimes things like sense of humor. Those things can be inherited and be a part of our personality that we had no conscious way of learning those things. But for the most part, there's a lot of theories that suggest that it's also your environment. So the main theories of personality are psychoanalytic perspective, and these are the ones we're going to cover, humanistic perspective, social cognitive perspective, and trait perspective. There are more personality theories, but those are the major historic ones. Of course, the psychoanalytic perspective on personality was developed by Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud. Pause it and just look up the first 10 things you can find on the internet about Freud, videos and articles, and just Google him, where he came from, why he became a physician, why he kind of branched into the field of psychology, some of his very controversial methods and techniques. And I think if you took a second and just looked up Freud, again, don't take too long, but then come back to me. He believed that sexuality was fundamental human motive, and aggression was the second most powerful human instinct, which basically says that he believed we did everything with two major motivations, sexuality and aggression. And so a lot of his theories revolve around that. He was controversial. Science doesn't do a great job of, holding up his theories in a way that they could be tested and verified scientifically. So there's a lot of controversial things that surround the way that he developed his theories, if his theories even hold up in scientific rigor. But for the most part, he is the foundation of this way of looking at human behavior and the personality. So we have to address it. We need to look into it. And I will say that the more you study the psychoanalytic perspective, you find out that his theories were improved upon and studied in a more rigorous way by people that came after Freud. So, but what he really came in to say, and what we still talk about today, is this concept of the unconscious. That we're unconsciously motivated. Our personality is affected by these unconscious processes. And we talked about levels of consciousness, conscious, preconscious, unconscious. Conscious thought is what you're thinking now, what you're aware of in your surroundings, internally and externally. Preconscious are things that you're not thinking of now, but they are in your memory system and you can just pull them up easily if you need to. Like, what'd you have for dinner last night? Or what's your mom's first name? Pretty easy to pull up. Unconscious is where he gets and where he emphasizes that our motivations lie. These places within us that are not easily accessible, that we can't just pull up and remember. They're hidden or repressed, but they still affect our behavior. And these unconscious thoughts, or this unconscious part of our mind, affects us, affects our decision making, affects our ability to reach our goals, who we're attracted to, people that jobs that we are interested in, or careers, these unconscious things. So basically, what Freud believed is that the things that happen to us in our childhood mainly affect us, and our human nature, our brain's way of dealing with mostly unpleasant, anxiety-provoking memories is to repress them or push them out of our consciousness. They're still there, they still affect you, and they still can play a big part in who your personality is. And where the problem comes in, or could come in, is if these unconscious, unresolved childhood issues are not dealt with, then sometimes we see in adults patterns, things that they do over and over that cause their lives to be unsuccessful or unfulfilling in relationships, in jobs, personal health, etc., etc. So if we are, as humans, making the same mistakes, even if they come in different packages, and we don't address those mistakes from our unconscious pain as a child, then we're doomed to make the same mistakes and therefore suffer those consequences. When you see a pattern of mistakes, you have to figure out why you're making them on a conscious level to be able to fix them and to live your best life as an older adult. Okay, so when we talk about Freud, we use some analogies, and in the slide on the iceberg, it compares what is called the 3 levels of consciousness, conscious, preconscious, and unconscious, that we've already talked about, with 3 parts of the personality according to Freud. Now, we say parts of the personality, what we're really talking about are abstract components of who we are according to Freud. So with Freud, he talks about, among many other aspects of his theories, that our personality has 3 parts. So let's address those: the id, the ego, and the superego. So if you go down to the id slide and you see like this out of control monster looking dog, that visual is to represent what he called the personality structure id, where that's a part of our personality that is instinctual, is fantasy based, is rebellious, impulsive, immune to logic, pleasure seeking. Okay, so Freud would say, oh, a 2-year-old is guided by their id. You know, they want it, they'll throw a fit if they don't get it. It's what they call the pleasure principle, where the personality is motivated to do anything that feels good and fun and avoid anything that is unpleasant or considered hard work or painful. Unfortunately, if you're led by just your id throughout your life, past that age, you make a lot of mistakes based on your wants as opposed to what you need to do, or what you need to do to be productive and healthy and things of that sort. So the id is a part of our personality that we almost need to wrangle. We need to take control over. We need to balance. There is a time and a place for the silly, pleasure-seeking side of our personality, but it has to be tempered or balanced by the moral other side of your personality, which Freud calls superego. So this id, this, I use this symbolism of if your personality had 3 parts, the id would be the little devil on your shoulder, and the superego would be the little angel on your shoulder, and you're the ego in the middle trying to decide how to please both sides. You want a piece of cake? Fine, don't eat the whole cake. have a piece of cake and then, go running later or go for a walk after dinner or have a small piece. If you want to do something crazy and adventurous, make sure that you also get your work done. And, so it's just kind of finding that balance between I just want to have fun over here, but I also have responsibilities, and to not let either one of them take over your personality side. Because the superego, like I said, is on the other side of your shoulder, where it says like, that, I don't know, shame-filled guilt, praises you for being a good kid or a good person, but then internalizes those moral standards. Oh, I'm bad if I want to, eat this fattening food, or if I just want to lay around and watch movies, or if I want to just give in to any impulses I have, sexual or aggressive impulses. That's that id, that crazy side of you. But that superego says, no, all those things are bad. You're bad. You shouldn't even think of those things. Those are horrible things. So, like I said, neither one is appropriate unless you have the ego, who is the responsible decision maker, the mediator between the id and the superego, finding that balance, having fun, and getting work done. And so it is, Freud goes into a lot of this. Ego is based in reality principle, and studied this for a long time, but really reality principle, where you see the most successful, healthiest people are people that learn to postpone gratification in accordance to the demands of the external world, meaning that you can't get what you want immediately. You can't even get things you can't afford right now, but if you work hard, or you wait, or you save, or you postpone, or you deliberate, you can be, the ego part of your personality can be in charge and then help you make the best decisions. So delayed gratification and postponing gratification is a part of the role of the ego that understands reality and logic, that doesn't say, just because I want it right now, I'm going to get it, or I should never want anything and feel guilty about it. Is finding that balance in the middle. So what the personality theory states is that the ego needs defending. This personality theory says that Freud uses something called ego defense mechanisms, and these are largely unconscious ways that we kind of deceive and tell ourselves certain things in order to not feel guilty, and others in order to not feel that uncomfortable response we have when we give into our id and do things that we know that aren't right. So the defense mechanisms are the following. You have repression. Repression is when you do something that you feel bad about, and you the way to deal, or it just causes you anxiety in general. You can even have repression like from childhood, and you didn't even know it was bad, like your parents were arguing and it was so painful to you that you just suppress it from your memory. You just forget it, and it occurred, but you try to say, okay, I don't want to remember that happened, so I'm going to just protect myself by repressing those thoughts. Rationalization is when something happens and you claim a different motive. You don't want to say, oh, okay, I'm not a good person, or I'm not a smart person, so you make up excuses about it. So you use rationalization. So a rationalization would be like if you were late to school and you cut somebody off in the parking lot, you take their spot, and you're like, I'm in a bigger hurry than they are, and they should have gotten here sooner, or you just make these excuses for being a mean person, because if not, your ego would suffer. So you rationalize, well, I have more important things to do, or you shouldn't have been in my blind spot, or that teacher is too hard to understand, so I couldn't get my work done. You rationalize because you don't want to be truthful, because if you were truthful, you might end up really hurting your self-esteem. The problem with that is sometimes you need to be truthful to change mistakes or fix mistakes. You got to say, okay, that was, I didn't work hard enough in that class, so I need to change what I did, instead of just always rationalizing or making excuses. Displacement is when we shift feelings to a new object. Displacement is when you have this negative energy, this negative emotional part of your personality, and you take it out on something else. It can be very in extreme levels like bullying or abusive, because if you, let's give an example of displacement. Let's say that you had a bad day at work and you had a flat tire and you got a ticket on the way home, and you come home and you just punch the wall, or you kick the dog, or you take it out on your children. That's displacement. You have that negative energy. It's legit negative energy, but instead of dealing with it on a conscious level, it comes out and it kind of spews that negative energy on other people. That's like shifting it to usually a different object or a weaker object. And that's often sometimes people use that as an ego defense mechanism, and usually unconscious. Sublimation is considered the only positive one out of the defense mechanisms, according to psychologists and Freud. Sublimation the definition is when you transform vile to valuable, but what it means is when I'm kind of referring to as negative energy or negative emotions, that you actually take it out on something productive and less harmful. So when you have stress and negativity and negative emotions, the way that energy works is it's transformed. You can't just get rid of that. So you either internalize it, which can turn into health problems, or you externalize it in a negative way and you hurt other people, or you drive aggressively, or you yell at the waitress that forgot your sugar in your tea. Some kind of minor thing turns into a big thing because you're taking out your negative energy onto somebody else. But when you do it in a positive way, which I would tell my young students all the time, learn this when you're younger, habits, is taking that stress that everybody's going to have, that negativity, and doing something positive with it, like exercise or a creative outlet like music or art, cooking, journaling, physical activity of any kind. Just taking out that negative, stressful energy into something productive, something healthy. A lot of my students say they sleep, but that just kind of suppresses it. So it's finding a good way to take that. Sublimation is transforming something bad and to try to put it into something good. Projection is when you attribute your own faults to others. That's when you're going through something and unconsciously you deny it, so you say somebody else is doing it. So you could have a roommate and you come home and you've had a horrible day, they're on the couch and you say, "What's wrong? You've been mad at me since I walked in the door," and your roommate's like, "What?" Right? You're projecting your bad mood onto them. Projection happens in relationships, unfortunately. Like you see, I kind of tend to worry about people who are extremely jealous and accusatory in relationships, because according to Freud, not Professor Z, but Freud, oftentimes that's projection. So if you're with somebody who's obsessed with you trying to date somebody else, you looking at other people you want to date, and they're so obsessed with that it's possible they're projecting their own urges onto you, or maybe even a behavior that they're doing and they don't want to admit it, so they accuse somebody else of doing it. That's projection. Reaction formation is when you do the opposite. You convert the opposite emotion. So you have an embarrassing or an emotion that you don't want to deal with, so you do the opposite. It's also like hypocrisy or something you might have, and it's definitely extreme. So you might have like a minister who is so damning in their delivery of a message. You're going to hell, you're a sinner, you're a horrible person. Well, reaction formation would be an example if they were secretly stealing from the church. So they have one extreme side on this side and they're doing something very bad on the other side. So because they're doing something so bad, they try to act extra pious or extra moral. And it's like Freud's way of saying that people are trying to hide something. And so it could also be like, if you did something wrong and you're feeling guilty about it, you might do something nice for somebody to make yourself feel better. So let's say you were, bully, or you were mean to somebody on social media, and you feel regret. And so then like 2 days later, you're commenting on their picture, how wonderful they look, or how not, just like, oh, I feel bad about this, so I'm going to try to undo it by doing something on the other extreme side. Denial is of course a river in Egypt. Regression, just kidding. Get it? Denial. Denial is just disbelief of present reality. So denial is often associated with health or something that could affect you, and you're instead of admitting to it or dealing with it, you just deny it. So you take your grandpa to the doctor. The doctor says, "Hey, your diabetes is getting kind of out of control, and you need to really cut down on certain things." And then on the way home from the doctor, your grandpa says, "Hey, you want to get some ice cream?" Like, "Grandpa, you can't get ice cream. He just said stop eating sugar." Oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Denial can be dangerous. And it's usually painful to admit, so you have to admit it to work through it. You have to make something unconscious conscious to get through and to fix a situation. And denial is often like, that's not me. That's not happening. I don't have to believe it, but it's true. And then the last one is regression. Regression is simply, according to Freud, reverting to an earlier stage of life to deal with negative situations. So you regress. So you might be 20-year-old, doing your thing, very evolved, very appropriate in your actions, but then you have a breakup and then you just want to go home and grab your blankie and snuggle up to your mom and be 4 years old again, To a certain degree, that's not unhealthy, but if you're regressing as a pattern of behavior, it can be a defense mechanism that's very unproductive. I got to go back and relive my teenage years, or I want to throw a tantrum every time I don't get my way. These are behaviors that adults shouldn't have. And then if you're regressing, Freud believes that you're just protecting your ego and you're using these defense mechanisms in a negative way. All right, so there's our defense mechanisms. There's some more information about Freud. Definitely look up and read over the humanistic perspective, which is another personality perspective in your book, and the people associated with that. Unconditional positive regard is a part of humanistic perspective. The social cognitive perspective that says that. Now, if you'll go to the slide, I have it on 19, but if you go to the slide with the triangle on social cognitive theory, it's definitely one of my favorites to teach. It really talks about how your cognitive factors, which are the things you think, affect your behavioral factors, that's what you do, and then the environment around you affects. So these three things, according to the social cognitive theory, help develop your personality, how you think, what you do, and what you surround yourself with. That includes the physical environment and the people that you surround yourself with in your environment. So a lot of therapeutic programs revolve around this concept of fixing problems, because if your personality is suffering for one reason or another, then you need to trigger and identify what cognitive factors put you in that situation, how your thinking is predicting your outcomes. Cognitive. So if I'm thinking I'm not smart, then my behaviors would potentially be, then why do my homework or why try to go to college because I'm not smart. And then if I'm doing those behaviors, then my environment are going to reflect that with, well, then I'm going to hang around with people that don't have goals or people that have low self-esteem or treat their bodies poorly. And then those three things interact. Reciprocal determination means that your thoughts affect your behaviors that affect your environment. The good news is, on the flip side, and a lot of therapists deal with this, is if you can start to change your thoughts or even your behaviors or your environment, that the other two things will be affected. And that's a very positive thing. If you start changing your thinking patterns, like how am I smart instead of I'm not smart? Like, I might be a smart mechanic, or I might be good with landscape or outdoor and plants and things like that. Figure out, ways to change that negative thinking into positive thinking, productive thinking. You have to identify the negative thinking pattern, change it, and then it'll affect how you act, and it'll affect what you do in your environment. If you can't change your thoughts, then you need to change your environment and have those affect your thoughts and behaviors. And if you can't change your environment, you can change your behavior. You can start acting like a healthy person or doing things that a wise, smart person would do, and that will affect how you think and your environment. I wish I could talk about this on and on and on, because it's just something I struggled with for myself. Whenever I've hit some kind of roadblock or obstacle in my life, I have to realize, well, for example, having such a hard time in college algebra. I was just thinking, well, I'm not smart. I'm not good at this. I shouldn't be in college. And it was starting to affect my motivation and what I was doing with my life at that time, until I realized that, okay, algebra is challenging for me, and I have to switch that from I can't do this to I can do this. I'm gonna have to work a little bit harder, or get tutorial, or work harder than other people to relearn some of the basics. I can do this. I am smart enough to do this. When I started changing my thought processes, then I started coming to class and getting help and sitting in the front row, and doing behaviors with homework that reflected that thinking pattern. And then my environment was surrounding myself with other people that were, motivated and wanting to be successful and getting a college degree. These three factors came together at a certain time in my life that could either have taken me into a negative pathway of giving up and having like low self-esteem thoughts about my intelligence, or changing that and affecting everything that happened after that, my degrees and the patterns of success I've had academically. So I wish that I could, really emphasize to my students, pay attention to those thoughts. They're powerful. Pay attention to the things you do. They affect how you think about yourself. And pay attention to your environment. Be around people that uplift you and support you. Be in a place that brings you joy, physically, emotionally. Try to do things and be around people that help you be a better person, so that you're thinking that you deserve the success and the love and the things in life that are going to bring you fulfillment. All right, so the last part talks about behavioral genetics and how much of that we kind of started with. The documentary I would definitely recommend here, if you haven't watched it, is Three Identical Strangers. It's an incredible story of nature versus nurture. And then the end talks about assessing personality, and I usually put a link in your activities of a personality test. Traits are like ways in which we define who we are, and there's different personality tests that can do that. That doesn't mean those things are permanent, or that they just are stagnant and they don't necessarily adapt, or they're that way all the time if you score in a certain personality test. But it is interesting to look at traits that define you. They just don't. Trait theory and personality tests just tell a little bit of the story. It doesn't really do a good job of telling or explaining somebody's holistic who they are and their personality, but it's a way to look at things and identify things and understand yourself better based on traits. So there'll be some personality tests that you can take to kind of explore that in your own life. The difference between two types of personality tests, though, are the projective tests that mainly deal with more of the psychoanalytic perspective, that say we're going to try to find out things about you that are hidden or that you're not aware of, that you're not trying to block or hold back. So there's things like projective test and ink blot test and the thematic apperception test, word association. These things are meant to kind of, according to the psychoanalytic theory, find out things about yourself that maybe you're blocking or hiding. And then there's self-report tests that you just answer true, false, or you answer questions based on your belief about yourself. You report those things, and then it gives you results based on certain categories of personality. Be careful with personality tests, though. There's a lot of fake ones, or I would say inconclusive, unreliable ones, but it's interesting to put them together and see if it paints a picture of who your personality is. So that's all. I'm done for today, and if you have any questions, just email me. Thanks.